Welcome to Growing a Dental Practice. All you need to know to start, run, and grow your dental practice. Each week, dental marketer Mike Hennon chats with doctors Lewis Butler and Sahil Tucker about their journey as principal dentists. Plus, interviews with prominent and upcoming figures in the world of dentistry and beyond. Now, here's your host, Mike Hennon.
Hey guys, just before we jump into the podcast itself, a quick message from me. This is actually quite a long episode, so what we've done is decided to split it into 3 parts. The first 2 parts are all about the business plan itself, and the final part, part 3, is about the projections that go along with your business plan. So enjoy the next couple of episodes. They are very thorough, very deep, and Sahil really knows what he's talking about when it comes to business plans. So enjoy the podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to the latest episode of the Growing a Dental Practice podcast. I'm joined today by my co-host, Dr. Sahil Tucker, and today is all about, do you really need a business plan? So we're going to look at the reasons why you need a business plan, and then even better, we're going to talk through the actual business plan that Sahil used to secure funding for his own practice. So you won't be able to see this, so we'll do our best to explain what we're looking at and explain why it's there and what it's useful for. But let's go. So Sahil, let's dive in.
Yes, absolutely, Mike. So you've mentioned a couple of really important things, and I think a business plan is central to the process of setting up a practice. I think there are several elements to it. I think the first element is your own sort of reassurance that you've got a viable business, or you've potentially got a viable business, because you don't really know until you actually open. I also think it's important to secure funding, because why put your money into something? You should try and use as much of someone else's money. And that's where, let's be honest here, that's where the banks come in. And unfortunately, if someone's going to lend you a lot of money, they're going to want to know, what's in it for them. Do they have a viable business? Are you just going to take their money and nothing's going to come of it? So they've got to do their due diligence as well. So I think those are the 2 sort of main bits. So you know what you're doing, and you know that you've been thorough in what you're doing, and also that the bank can trust you as a person. Because if you say to someone, let me borrow X amount of money, and they'll just say no, or you can say to someone, let me borrow X amount of money, and this is what's going to happen, this is how I think we're going to get a return over this period, and this is why I think it's a viable business, then they're going to be, you're just going to have a lot more credibility. The better the business plan, the more credibility you get. With regards to the other point, we will come to this, I think, towards the end, but I think where my business plan falls down is that there's no marketing plan, but there's also no sort of do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. It is just a summary of the research that I've done and why I think this is a viable business. It's very much looking from the bank's perspective, not from my perspective. So I didn't have, as part of this business plan, a marketing plan, which I should have. But then we've been quite lucky in that a lot of our patients just walk in through the door, or, this is again where the business plan came in terms of reassuring me of the viability of the business. But a lot of our patients just walk by, or it's word of mouth, because, we're in a mixed residential commercial development, and we're quite lucky that, we've got 700 flats above, 200 flats opposite, and we've got hundreds of flats going up in the vicinity. And thankfully, people talk to one another. We've also got lots of businesses close by. Exactly. That's still a thing. It's quite social. We've got a lot of local businesses where people will likely have similar interests. So, for example, beauticians, hair salons, gyms, yoga studios, stuff like that, where people clearly like to invest in their appearance and their well-being, and that helps us as well. So those are the 2 main reasons, and then the one shortcoming, which I wish I'd done better.
Yeah, no, perfect. So the key reasons are obviously secure funding, and I guess just like you say, your particular business plan didn't go into too much depth for this, but at least it gave you an idea of whether the business was feasible or not, which is obviously always useful when you're starting a venture. So that's great. At what point in your journey did you start thinking about business planning? Did you think about it just in time for the securing the bank funding, or did you think about it as soon as you started thinking about a practice?
Both. I would say I started thinking about a rudimental sort of business plan quite early on. So it's a little bit weird. My landlord is a massive company called St. George, massive property developers, and they want to have a quality development, and that's their USP, if you like. They produce quality flats with quality businesses and things like that, and they wanted me to put to them a proposal to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Now, that was fairly easy for me to do because, as we heard in our previous podcast, I knew why I was doing what I was doing. I knew the type of practice I wanted. I knew the workflow. I knew the treatments we were going to offer. I knew our target market on the basis of the why. So I kind of had to do not a business plan, but it was more a proposal, like a PowerPoint slide thing. And a lot of that just got copied over onto this final business plan and then sort of padded out a little bit with more information. So, for example, the developer obviously wouldn't have expected me to say, right, do a competition analysis, because they're not lending me the money. Whereas, to be fair, I don't think NatWest expected me to do a competition analysis. That was something that I did off my own back and off my own initiative for my own products.
That's one of the sections I'm really looking forward to asking you about, actually, because you told me how you got all the answers, and I'm like, this is going to be great. Great content.
Well, this is it. But to answer your question, when did I start creating it? It happened in dribs and drabs. Part of it was as part of the why. Part of it is because the developer wanted me to do it. And part of it was because this is what I was advised needs to go into a business plan for the bank. So early on in the process, I was talking to financial brokers, because that's what I thought the way forward was in terms of getting finance and securing finance. Also, the idea was floated about by people I was talking to that just approach banks directly. And so I got some ideas of these financial brokers, but also I did business studies for A-level, and this plan is actually not too dissimilar to that. It is just a bunch of what are your objectives, what's your profile, what's the area like, what's the demographic like, all that kind of stuff. And some of the content in it actually comes from American dental forums, where they talk a lot about demographic research and that sort of thing. I don't think we tend to do it. I think we're quite a densely populated country, so I think we take it for granted that there are just going to be enough patients if we, especially somewhere like London, whereas America can be quite sparsely populated, and I don't understand too much about it, but I'm assuming that's the reason why they do a lot of these demographic reports and things like that.
Awesome.
So that's why.
So that's kind of why you need a business plan, and sort of at what point of the journey you should kind of do it. So let's dive right into your business plan, because when you talked to me about this previously, I'm like, this sounds great, very thorough. You're obviously a very thorough person anyway. And so to kick things off, why on earth is your business plan titled A Breath of Fresh Air? I have to know.
So this goes back to the developer thing. So basically what I needed to put in as part of my offer, and my offer was outrageous to them in terms of outrageously low. So actually we're going to digress a little bit. Book to read.
Oh, a book to read. I love a book.
I can't find it. It's not easily accessible on my bookshelf, but there's no point in me waving it about. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I want to say. Voss. Really good book, and I was reading that at the time, so I made an outrageously low offer. And sometimes, for want of a better word, you just got to get your balls out and put them on the line and say, look, this is what I'm going to offer you, and I'm a dentist, so take it or leave it.
When you say offer them, what are you actually offering them? Like, is that a rent, like a rental?
Yeah, terms.
Yeah.
No, don't get me wrong. This is a massive company, so there's no way they're losing out on this. But I still want to get the best possible deal that I can compared to.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So to them, the way I saw it was they're going to get a unit filled that was otherwise empty. It's in what was a slow market for a landlord. So I went outrageously low. But sorry, going back to the point, I had to do a proposal for them as part of that offer, and then I just had to knock something up really quickly. Now, it's obviously really easy for me to talk about the plan, the planned practice, and the staffing and how we're going to work, and the equipment we're going to have, the services we're going to offer. It's easy to talk about myself. But she'd sent me a couple of sample proposals about adjacent units, and all of them had a tagline. And so I was like, I need a tagline. So it was literally the first thing.
I love that.
I was like, right, I need to get this off. It will do. Off it goes. So I'm not very much a that'll do kind of person, but
I'm surprised you didn't squeeze in a dental pun. Like it could have been.
Yeah, and there probably was, but I sort of chewed that over.
Oh no!
And I decided against it.
There it is.
So that was the tagline.
So that was that. So you basically created a tagline for your business plan.
Exactly, and it was done in a rush, and that's the content.
Okay, cool.
And I think I've just wasted 5 minutes of everyone's time telling you that.
No, that makes. I enjoyed it. I read it. I was like, that's just in random. But that's I'm glad you clarified it. So that's brilliant. So something to note is it just to check? This is the only version you had, yeah? This is the version you sent to, say, like the banks and stuff.
This is a version I sent to the bank, not a version I sent to the developer.
Okay, cool. So just for people listening, if you're thinking it has to be like a very fancy looking document, don't worry. You got the funding and it's a very plain, very simple document.
I'm going to beat my drum a little bit.
Yeah.
If we're not already. When I went to NatWest, I didn't think... Now, I never signed anything without reading, but I didn't think I'd applied for the funding. The guy got in touch with me a few days later and said, you've been approved for XYZ amount of money. When I was there, he said to me, this was probably one of the best business plans he's seen. And clearly I was a very thorough person. So already I'm thinking, oh, this is amazing. I'll smash this because I'm a cocky so-and-so. But since then, I've been told by 3 separate business consultants that this is probably the best business plan that they've seen, or one of the best top 3, top 5, whatever business plans they've seen. To me, this is just the way I am. In terms of, I think we talked about this last time. If I buy a washing machine, I need to know absolutely everything about it. And this is part of it. I'm a really thorough person.
Yeah, of course.
But then you get that decision paralysis. So I would say that do they call it paralysis by analysis or something like that? I would say that this is certainly very good in terms of impressing banks and stuff like that and impressing other people. But the only person that pays your mortgage is you. So you need to make sure that it's something that you can read and something that you can understand. And there's no point putting in 12, 15 pages. This is just 12 pages of words. And then we've got the projections to add to that, which is another 8 or 9 pages worth of Excel spreadsheets. It's no point you putting that together if you don't understand it or paying someone to put it together for you, because it's just going to sit in a drawer. And I know that there are certain business consultants, very successful people who say that the business plan is just for the bank and then it sits in the drawer. This is something that I use from time to time, but also it's something that I don't think makes or breaks business. I think it makes or breaks finance, possibly quite probably, but I don't believe it makes or breaks business. I think that's where I wish I had a marketing plan. This is just ideas and reassurance. It doesn't tell me what I need to do.
Yeah, no, that's good. But first of all, well done for getting like one of the best business plans. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good achievement. You should add that to your CV.
It's obviously nice when people say that, but like I said, ultimately, and I'm not saying that these are not genuine words, and of course I'm proud of that, but ultimately words don't pay our mortgages.
Of course.
It's got to be something that you can follow. So if you don't think that you're going to follow a 12-page document, which is I don't know how many thousand words, 3,000 words, 2,700 words, then don't do it. Do as little as possible to satisfy the bank and go and focus your energies on something else, is what I would advise. But for me, I have to do this because that's the kind of person I am.
That's who you are. Yeah, that's cool, man. And also to go back to that point I was making, was really your document is all about the content. So, it's neatly formatted. It's really simple. But you haven't got to worry about it being like this, a pretty document or brand colours and stuff. It just has to have the content in there. And like you say, it's literally just for the bank. So the bank's not going to care. They're going to care more about the words that you put in, all the stuff, all the research you do, the finances, that kind of thing. How it looks is not an issue.
I think, again, it's looking at your target market. So it was all branded up for the developer because, firstly, the contact, the developer and the agent, they were both roughly my age. I think they were maybe 3 or 4 years older than me. So you're targeting to a younger audience. And, as younger people, we like things with more pictures, a bit more interactive, more bullet points, that sort of stuff. And then the bank manager I was speaking to was 60-something and was very blunt. He was to the point. And if that's who you're dealing with, then that's the kind of document you want. If I fill it out with flowery stuff, they're going to get distracted by that and think this is more style over substance. And obviously you want the substance to come through. So I wanted it. Yeah. Again, it's like this by design, not because I couldn't be bothered to spruce it up.
Actually, that's a very good point. Actually, it's just design it, tailor it to the audience. It's a very good point.
Like you would a CV.
Exactly. Yes. Brilliant. So moving on to like the first real section of the document, you've got your summary. So obviously a lot of people will be familiar with like your executive summary of like a thesis and stuff like that. Just quickly explain what the summary is all about.
It's just a summary of the business. I'm not going to read it word for word, but essentially in the summary it's 6 lines, 5.5 lines, and I'm saying Dickens Yard Dental is going to be a new premium dental practice with an emphasis on technology and being environmentally friendly and just being friendly in general, and changing the perception of dentistry. I've got a quick note of the fact that there are 1,400 new apartments going on in the local area, and the area is pretty affluent. And that's literally it. That's all it is. There's no expansion on any of these points. It's saying, this is who we are, this is where we're going to set up, this is what we're going to do, this is why it's going to work. 1,400 apartments and affluent population, and that's it.
That's perfect, yeah. Everything in a nutshell, so that's brilliant. The next section was obviously quite easy for you because you've done that thinking in advance. So the next section is why. Mm-hmm. And again, it's just a summary or a concise explanation of why you're starting the practice, what you're aiming to do. And like we talked about in the previous episodes, you've got that down to a T, really.
Yes, this is, again, so for people who can't see it, it's 10 lines, it's 3 paragraphs. It's a distillation of what we've discussed at the last podcast, and as we found last time, I can speak about this for ages. And but then you've got to bear in mind that there's a human on the other end of this document. Just get out the main points, cut it down, and then you've got something that's quite concise. And don't let the essence of your message go, but you've got something that's concise and someone's actually going to read.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Perfect. The next section is titled Objectives. And you split them out into financial, operational, customer, and people. So what were you trying to achieve with this particular section?
This was purely for the bank.
Yeah.
This was because I'm pretty sure I Googled this and I saw a good business plan must have objectives. So then I must have seen somewhere else that there are 4 types of objectives. I have no idea. Well, clearly, the fake it till you make it attitude worked, because then I have a financial objective to expand on that. That is, being profitable by X amount of time and breaking even by X amount of time, and getting the return on my investment by X amount of time. And then the second point is operational. When I want new surgeries to be added, and on this you may even have, I don't have a microscope, so I'm going to buy a microscope 6 months in, or I don't have a CBCT machine, I'm going to buy this at this stage because this is when I expect this to happen, i.e. have enough patients to place implants or do high-level endo. The customer objectives to generally, gather positive reviews and have a positive reputation. So that's fairly, it's fairly loose in terms of, not loose, but vague, I guess, in terms of what it says. And then the people thing, how we have a big focus on our people we want. My view is if my team are happy, my patients will automatically be happy. If my team aren't happy, then that will transfer onto the way that they answer their phone, the way that they greet patients, the way that they do their dentistry. So that's really important. So part of the objectives there are to create a strong team. I talk a little bit about recruitment. So in my business plan, I've written to be able to recruit hygienists towards the end of year 1. It does not fit in with my why. I hate perio. I hate cleaning teeth. So the first thing I did was get a hygienist the day, I opened, or the week after I opened. So I didn't follow the business plan on that front. And the people lending you the money are healthcare specialists. They work in this industry. They know roughly, they know what the numbers should look like, but they know roughly how everything works. Like you have a hygienist, you have dentists and that sort of stuff. But it just did not fit in with my personal goals to be sitting there cleaning teeth. I didn't think that was a good use of my time. And in terms of income, a hygienist will gross somewhere between £150 and £200 an hour, depending on the treatment, sometimes a little more. A dentist should be grossing near enough £300 an hour. That's not £300 in our pockets, unfortunately. That's £300 and then less overheads, less wages, this, that, etc. And then you should be looking to take a chunk of that. So that's, really important. And then I've talked about recruiting an associate. I've talked about recruiting nurses, treatment coordinators, practice managers, that sort of stuff. And then the final thing I've talked about in people, which I probably should have put in operational, is actually having a team that's multi-skilled so that we don't have to refer stuff out. So that's all there. But a lot of it was just vague ideas I had that I've put into bullet points that I thought would appease the bank.
As I say, it's just from their perspective. It just shows that you're thinking further ahead than just in the moment or that initial start phase. You are thinking further ahead, and I guess that, like you say, it's reassuring to them, isn't it, that you know what you're talking about, what you're thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Yes, in short, but it also. So this obviously went to NatWest, but it also went to Braemar. Braemar do sort of equipment finance, and they know very intimately. It also went to a few other companies. They know, and then so the idea was, if I've got a good business plan, I can ask a few companies. We can play them off each other. We can get good rates. So Braemar are a big player in the dental world, and they obviously know the industry quite well. And for me to be able to turn around and say, right, I'm going to hire an associate this time, I'm going to hire this time, and they've also got my projected financials in front of them. They can say, right, this is all joined up. So those points that I've made about the financial objectives, about the people objectives, they're actually reflected in my Excel spreadsheet projections as well, where I've sort of tied in, actually this month we're going to be having 60 clinical hours a week, and obviously it's physically impossible for someone to do that. So then this ergo we will have an associate, and this is reflected in the hourly rates that we're projecting and things like that. So it's all got to tie in terms of your projections can't say one thing and then your business plan say another, because I think that discrepancy will work against you. It's better not to say anything at all. Just get your numbers right and don't have this section in there, because its presence will invite scrutiny, and you've got to be confident that your numbers will back up, when you're going to hire someone and when you're going to, get new equipment and things like that.
Great point to make. So we've had the summary, we've had the why and the objectives. So the next thing is the about me section. I obviously read through this and made some notes, because you've covered quite a lot of things in your about me section. So I think it's probably your most detailed section and the longest section, isn't it, in your business plan? And so basically what you've done is you basically covered initially your education, so where you studied and so on. You've touched on your reputation as a dentist, which I thought was really interesting. So you mentioned that it's been noted that you're approachable, friendly, reassuring, that kind of thing, which is a good, nice. I guess that's quite a nice thing to read as a bank or as someone lending. You then got, which I think is obviously quite nice, is your connection to the area. So it's not a completely brand new area you have actually grown up in the vicinity, that must make quite a difference as well.
Yeah, but also, again, these people are local, they know the area, so it's not just a faceless person somewhere halfway across the country. They know where, so I'm set up in Ealing, they know that it's in Ealing, and they also know that I don't work anywhere near Ealing. And a lot of what happens in the dental world is you'll have a reputation with your own patients, and you won't necessarily solicit your patients, but they will follow you. Because I work as an associate 60, 70 miles away. And so I needed to say to them, look, I might not have roots to the area, or I might not have that, ready-made list that I would have if I was working relatively locally, or if I was buying an existing practice. But I know the area, I know what people are like, I know the trajectory, I know what the community is like, that sort of thing. Going back to the previous things about the reputation, I think that's really, really important. So people in Google reviews have mentioned, hey, look, he's approachable, friendly, nervous. So he's helped me, inspired me being nervous, that sort of thing.
He's a nervous dentist. I love it.
But, this is all about beating your own drum. And if you're not going to do it, then who is?
Yeah.
And that's what that was about. And education, self-explanatory. Again, you've got to show your credentials. And I invest tens of thousands of pounds a year in my education, and it's got to come to something, and I'm going to write it down if I'm requesting a lot of money off a bank. So, that's part of the reason why I've got the Royal College memberships and things like that, because you get a few letters out your name. There's a little bit of importance attached to that by patients, they think, because if you look at a GP's letter or a doctor's letter or even other dentists, that their name is probably half of what's written on that line. The rest of it's just postal rules, and it kind of just looks good. So whilst they may not recognise that membership of the Royal College is actually just a formality, if you've trained in this country and know the system, but a banker won't necessarily know that, and a patient won't necessarily know that. So that's why that's there, and it's there to pad out the reputation.
Yeah, perfect. If you've got it, you might as well use it.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Yeah. Then the next section, which I think is this is going to be like an episode in its own right, but the transition. So you haven't just got in full time in your own practice. You are having a transition period, and it's the same with Lewis as well. Actually, he's slowly been moving over to his family practice, because like you want to keep your earnings up. You don't want to just go cold turkey, that kind of thing. So you're explaining, you're currently doing 4 days a week now, but over the next few months, I'm going to sort of reduce it by 1 day every month, that kind of thing, which is really interesting, and something that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about, which is really cool. You're talking about your initial opening hours. So again, this kind of factors into your transition, doesn't it? So initially, only be open like sort of 1 day a week. And as you transition away from your current practice to your own practice, then those hours will go up and change accordingly. And then one of my favourite things in here is your previous work experience or business experience. Do you want to tell us about that, your cleaning business?
Shall we start off with the work trajectory? We're going order.
Yes.
For my love of order.
Let's do that.
So just for context, I worked 4 days a week, slightly longer days, so it's still full-time hours in Chipping Norton in Oxfordshire. The demographic there, it was a mixed practice, and the demographic there is slightly older. Anyone who's worked in mixed practice will have that, where you get people who are really well off, and you get people who are not so well off, and you learn not to judge people, because it will be the people you least expect who will spend the most money and get the most rewarding treatments. But there's a certain way, and I'm very conscious of the way that I communicate, because I feel that I don't do it too well. There's a certain way that you speak to that particular demographic, who is, generally in their 50s or 60s, that sort of boomer generation, or just below, or just above. And there is a lot of talking about growing tomatoes and things like that, or just listening to them talk about grandkids and things like that. But my demographic in Ealing is not like that at all. We do have some older patients, but most of these patients are the same age as me. And you would think, well, why do you need to learn how to talk to people like that? So I was quite conscious that's one of my weaker points. So I went and took up a weekend job in Putney, which is similar demographic, perhaps slightly more affluent, similar part of London. It's not quite in the centre, but it's it's that sort of leafy suburb type thing, but it's not really a suburb. Just to get exposure to patients who are a similar age to me, who want similar treatments to what I want to offer and things like that. And in that practice, I do a fair bit of Invisalign, and that's the kind of treatment that I really enjoy. And at that moment in time, I wasn't doing so much Invisalign in Chipping Norton. That subsequently changed, but a lot of the work in Chipping Norton was doing required dentistry rather than cosmetic dentistry. So when I say that, I mean, big teeth that might break, and, that people need lots of crowns and things like that. Whereas the type of dentistry I'm doing at the moment is less so that, and it's more catering to a younger generation. It's just learning to speak to people and how to do that, and how different people are demanding in different ways. I would say slightly older people don't mind so much if things aren't 100%, in terms of, you'll say to them, this may not last forever, and they'll accept it, or they'll be okay with their filling falling out. Or slightly younger people might be more demanding, but then older people really want to be kept to time, and younger people, I mean, if they turn up late themselves, then that sort of thing. So they're a little bit more relaxed on that front. So that was the reason for taking up that job, and obviously I've wrote about it. Again, I talked about the way that I'm going to work my days, and which days I'm going to open, and the hours, and all sorts of things like that. That all ties in again to the projections. My projections are based on the number of hours worked a week, the days worked a week, that sort of thing, and this all ties into that. So again, you either don't say it at all, or if you do say it, make sure it matches up. And I spent a lot of time making sure that what I wrote matched my projections. So if I wrote that initially I'm going to work 3 days a week, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that my projections matched that, so that there were no holes. And, you don't want anyone to say no for any reason. But at the same time, I never then looked at the business plan again in that way, because I dropped my days in a much different way at my other practices. So initially I was working more in my own practice than I was expecting. And then, as things got busy, I was finding that I was still working too much in my old practices. Then the final thing is previous experience. Well, it kind of makes sense, right? You've got to put it in a business plan that people aren't going to lend you hundreds of thousands of pounds, without knowing what you're about. So I took a gap year, and during the gap year, this was recession time, 2910. So there were no jobs, or certainly there were no jobs that people were willing to offer me. There were probably jobs around, but I wasn't getting any of them. So I think, as I've said to you previously, I've been quite entrepreneurial, and there was always a will or a desire to work for myself, and I had a cleaning company, and I didn't have a driving license at this point, so it was literally transporting things around the tube. Yeah. So yeah, obviously someone put in a good word, you get your foot in the door, and then it sort of builds from there, and then you get bigger jobs and bigger jobs and bigger jobs. And there were weeks where I was making, even now there are weeks I was making more money as owning a cleaning company than I do as a dentist, for a different reason. This is a new practice, and it's, some weeks
of course,
really good and some weeks are not, but it was going really well. And then I sort of closed it down in the first year of dental school because it was affecting the progress. And I don't know that they've looked too much into this, if I'm absolutely honest. I didn't get asked.
But I think if they did read it and they did see that, it just shows great foresight from you. A great attitude towards work, that kind of thing. So if you're going to do that, I'd like to think if you're the sort of person that starts a business during your gap year, when really most of your peers are probably just bumming around doing nothing, then that shows your attitude. And
I would qualify by saying that I didn't really have the option, because I don't really come up from a family that's well off, so I didn't really have the option. If I wanted to go and travel and do things like that, I did a bit of that during my gap year, then I had to go out and earn the money. And it wasn't just a case of I'd go to bank of mum and dad and they'd write me a check, because those were a thing around that time, 11, 12 years ago. Kids listening don't know what checks are. So it was partly because this is what I want to do, partly because I'm driven and I don't really like sitting on my backside. I get really fidgety. Although you'll notice I've not been fidgeting very much today.
Yeah, quite calm actually.
Yeah, I know, right? Lack of coffee. But it was partly out of necessity, because if I wanted to do nice stuff, I've got to go out and make the money. And there we are. And I worked throughout university. There was that Woolworths thing that we talked about initially a few episodes ago. So that's always been part of it. And you also, as part of this, you want to bang on about how you're good at managing people and mentoring and all that, recruiting people. And, it's all just general faff, and just stick it in. It's the same way people do personal statements. Half of it, they're sort of half truths, if that makes sense. Yeah.
CVs are really padded out. Like we all put down GCSE German, and we can't remember it, but we put it down anyway.
I can remember a lot of French.
Can you now?
I
think
I'm
doing an episode in French.
No.
Just to wrap that section up then, because we've talked about, we mentioned it is probably it's your longest section, but I think it ticks all the boxes and gives someone reading this a great insight into the type of person you are and the experience you've got, which is really good, useful. So the last couple of sections are all about experience you have in sort of recruiting, training, and mentoring other people, which is great and obviously useful from an ownership perspective. And then finally, you've even, you're pointing out that you don't have the experience of running a dental practice, but people that already do that, and they're mentoring you, that kind of thing. And you've done a boot camp as well called Setting Up a Practice or Setting Up in Practice. So you're just showing even though you haven't, done it before, you've gone out there and you're willing to learn about it or willing to talk to the right people, which is, again, just shows the right attitude.
In short, yes.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the first part of the business plan episode. Tune in next week for part 2.
Thanks for listening to Growing a Dental Practice. For more insights, please subscribe and do leave us a review so that other people can find us. You can also find us on social media and on our website, growingadentalpractice.com.